The night the flood tried to take everything from him, a billionaire CEO discovered the only thing money could never buy was the stranger who refused to let him die. Hello beautiful souls, and welcome to Ms. Love Stories channel, the place where love, drama, and unforgettable moments come alive. I'm so thrilled you're here, ready to dive into stories that will make your heart race, bring tears, and leave you believing in the power of love. Before we begin, I want to get to know all of you. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because in the next video, I'll give a special shout out to some of you amazing viewers from around the world. I can't wait to see how far our love story family reaches. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, so you never miss a single emotional journey. Get ready to feel, laugh, cry, and fall in love all over again, because every story we share here is for you. Now, the story begins. Rose. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight. Not the gentle kind that whispered against windows and lulled people to sleep, but the kind that roared like it had something to prove. The kind that flooded streets, swallowed cars, and turned the city into something unrecognizable. Walter stood by the glass wall of his penthouse office, staring down at the chaos below. From up here, everything looked small, insignificant, controllable, just the way he liked it. "Sir, the board meeting has been rescheduled." His assistant's voice came softly from behind him. Walter didn't turn. "Cancel it." A pause. "Cancel entirely?" "Yes." There was no room for negotiation in his tone. There never was. Behind him, silence stretched before the faint click of heels retreated out of the room. Walter exhaled slowly, resting his hand against the cold glass. Rainwater streamed down the surface, distorting the city lights into blurred streaks, like tears he refused to acknowledge. Walter hadn't cried in years. Not since the day he buried the only woman who ever made him feel human. His mother. Feelings are distractions, he had told himself ever since. And he built his empire on that belief. From nothing to everything. From a boy who once counted coins to a man who signed deals worth millions without blinking. But tonight, something felt off. The storm wasn't just outside. It pressed against his chest, heavy and unrelenting. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Buzzed again. Annoyed, he glanced down. The screen lit up with a name he hadn't saved, but a number that somehow felt familiar. He declined it. Whoever it was, it didn't matter. Nothing personal ever mattered. That was the rule. And Walter never broke his own rules. Across the city, miles away from glass towers and silent penthouses, the storm felt very different. It didn't look small. It looked terrifying. Annabelle struggled to push her small wooden door shut as wind and rain forced their way inside. Water had already begun pooling across the floor, creeping closer to the thin mattress in the corner. "Not tonight, please, not tonight," she whispered under her breath. Her hands trembled, but she kept pushing. Finally, the door slammed shut. For now. She leaned against it, breathing heavily, her soaked hair clinging to her face. The single bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered dangerously. Everything she owned was in this one room. A few clothes, a kettle, and a small framed photo sitting carefully on a shelf. She walked over to it, picking it up gently. A younger version of herself smiled back, standing beside a man whose arm rested protectively around her shoulders. Her father. Annabelle swallowed hard. "You always said storms don't last forever," she murmured. Another loud crash of thunder shook the room. "But this one feels different." She set the photo down and grabbed her worn-out bag. Inside were a few essentials, things she never went without. Living like this had taught her one thing. Always be ready to leave. Always be ready to lose everything. A loud knock suddenly echoed through the door. Annabelle froze. No one ever came here. Especially not in a storm like this. The knock came again. Louder this time. "Help. Please. Anyone inside?" A man's voice. Desperate. Raw. Something in it made her heart race. She hesitated. Every instinct told her to stay quiet. To pretend she wasn't home. In this part of the city, opening your door to strangers often meant inviting trouble. But the voice. It didn't sound dangerous. It sounded broken. "Please," the man shouted again, his voice cracking. I can't hold on much longer." Annabelle clenched her fists. This was the moment. The kind her father used to talk about. The world will test your heart, he had said once. And in that moment, you'll decide who you really are. Another crash of thunder. Another desperate knock. She moved. Slowly. Carefully. Her fingers wrapped around the handle. For a brief second, she closed her eyes. Then she opened the door. Back in the high-rise, Walter finally moved away from the window. The storm had gotten worse. Much worse. His phone buzzed again. Same number. This time he answered. Who is this? Static. Then a voice. Don't leave tonight. Walter frowned. Excuse me? You don't know me. The voice continued, urgent, almost breathless. But if you leave that building tonight, something bad is going to happen. Walter's expression hardened. I don't entertain nonsense, he said coldly. This isn't nonsense, the voice snapped. Please just. He hung up. People always wanted something. Attention. Money. Control. He gave them none. Walter grabbed his coat. He had a meeting across town. Storm or not. Nothing stopped him. The streets were already flooding by the time his car pulled out. Water rushed across the roads like wild currents. Traffic was chaos. Horns blaring, people shouting, headlights reflecting off the rising floodwater. Sir, maybe we should turn back, his driver said nervously. Walter didn't even look up from his phone. Keep driving. The driver swallowed hard but obeyed. That was the thing about power. People listened. Even when they were afraid. Minutes passed. Then suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the air. A massive tree collapsed onto the road ahead. Sir, the driver shouted, swerving sharply. The car lost control. Tires skidded. Water splashed violently against the windows. And then, everything flipped. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. Cold water rushed in. Fast. Too fast. Walter's breath caught as icy floodwater filled the car within seconds. He tried to move, but his leg was trapped. Pain shot through him. The world blurred. The storm outside became a deafening roar as water swallowed everything. For the first time in years, Walter felt something he couldn't control. Fear. Real suffocating fear. His lungs burned. His vision darkened. And just before everything faded, a single thought crossed his mind. So this is how it ends. The door burst open. Annabelle's eyes widened. A man collapsed forward into her arms, soaked, bleeding, barely conscious. For a second, she didn't recognize him. Just another stranger. Broken. On the edge of death. But something about his face. Familiar. Powerful. Important. It didn't matter. Not right now. Hey. Stay with me, she cried, dragging him inside as the storm raged behind them. The door slammed shut. Water pounded against it. Inside that tiny room, two completely different worlds had just collided. And neither of them knew. This moment would change everything. If you were in Annabelle's place, would you have opened that door? Or would you have walked away? Tell me honestly in the comments. The first thing Walter felt was cold. Not the kind that brushed against your skin and passed. This one clung. Deep. Unforgiving. It seeped into his bones as if the storm had followed him inside. His chest jerked violently. And suddenly he coughed. Water burst from his lungs as his body fought to remember how to breathe. Good, that's it. A voice whispered, shaky but determined. Stay with me. Don't you dare give up now. Walter's eyelids fluttered open. The world came back in fragments. A dim light flickering above him. A ceiling too low. The faint smell of damp wood, and something warm, like ginger or tea. And then, her face. Blurry at first. Then slowly clear. A woman hovered over him. Her brows drawn tight with worry, strands of wet hair clinging to her cheeks. Her hands pressed firmly against his chest, steady, desperate. Walter tried to speak. Nothing came out. Only a weak rasp. Don't talk, she said quickly. You almost drowned. Her voice, it wasn't polished or controlled like the people he surrounded himself with. It was raw, real, and strangely calming. Walter's eyes shifted, scanning the small room. This wasn't a hospital. Wasn't even close. The walls were worn, the space barely enough for two people. Water dripped somewhere in the corner. Everything about it screamed struggle. He frowned. Confused. How? His voice cracked painfully. How did I get here? Annabelle let out a slow breath, sitting back on her heels. You don't remember? He blinked. Images flashed. The car. The water. The suffocating darkness. Then nothing. You were caught in the flood, she said softly. Your car was almost completely submerged. I saw it drifting near the roadside. Walter's brows tightened. You saw it? She nodded. I was trying to move some of my things to higher ground when I noticed something strange. The headlights were still on underwater. It didn't feel right. Her gaze dropped for a second, as if reliving it. I went closer. And I saw you inside. Walter stared at her. You went into the water? He asked, disbelief creeping into his tone. Annabelle gave a small shrug, almost dismissive. You were going to die. As if that explained everything. As if it was simple. Walter let out a quiet, disbelieving breath. People didn't do things like that. Not without reason. Not without expecting something in return. What do you want? He asked suddenly. The question hung in the air. Sharp. Cold. Annabelle's head snapped up. What? Money. Walter continued, his voice weak but still carrying that familiar authority. Recognition? Whatever it is, just say it. For a moment. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Then something shifted in her expression. Not anger. Not exactly. Something deeper. Disappointment. I want you to breathe properly, she said quietly. That's what I want. Walter blinked. I don't. You almost died, she cut in, her voice firmer now. And the first thing you think about is, what I want from you. He stared at her, unprepared for that. I don't even know who you are, she added, softer this time. And honestly, it doesn't matter. That unsettled him. Walter had spent years building a world where who he was mattered more than anything. His name opened doors. His presence commanded respect. But here, in this tiny leaking room, he was just a man who almost died. And for some reason, that made his chest tighten in a way he couldn't explain. Annabelle stood up and moved toward a small stove in the corner. You need something warm, she said, pouring water into a kettle. Your body's still in shock. Walter watched her silently. Every movement she made was careful, efficient. Like someone used to surviving with very little. Why did you do it? He asked after a moment. She paused. Didn't turn around. Do what? Save me. The kettle hissed softly as the flame flickered beneath it. Annabelle stared at it for a few seconds before answering. Because no one saved my father. Walter's expression shifted. Subtly. But it changed. She turned now, holding his gaze. He got caught in a flood like this, she continued, her voice quieter. People saw him. They watched, but no one helped. A beat. They said it was too dangerous. The words lingered in the air like ghosts. Walter swallowed. For once, he didn't have a response. I wasn't there, she added, almost to herself. But I keep thinking, if just one person had tried. Her voice broke slightly, but she steadied it. I couldn't let that happen again. Walter looked away. Something unfamiliar stirred inside him. Guilt? No. That didn't make sense. He hadn't done anything. But still, the weight of her words pressed against him. The kettle began to whistle. Annabelle poured the hot water into a cup, adding something from a small jar. Drink this, she said, handing it to him carefully. Slowly. Walter hesitated before taking it. Their fingers brushed. For a brief second, something passed between them. Unspoken. Unclear. He pulled the cup closer, the warmth seeping into his cold hands. What's your name? He asked quietly. Annabelle. He nodded once. Walter. She didn't react. Didn't widen her eyes. Didn't gasp. Just nodded back, as if his name carried no weight here. And somehow, that unsettled him even more. Outside, the storm raged louder. Water slammed against the door, seeping through the cracks. Annabelle noticed immediately. Her expression tightened. That's not good. She rushed over, grabbing a cloth and pressing it against the bottom of the door. The water kept pushing. Stronger. Faster. Walter tried to sit up straighter, wincing as pain shot through his leg. "You're injured," she said quickly, noticing. "Don't move too much." "This place," he muttered, looking around. "It won't hold." "I know." There was no panic in her voice. Just truth. Raw and unavoidable. Walter's grip tightened around the cup. For the first time, he wasn't in control. Not of the situation. Not of the outcome. And not of the strange, growing awareness that the woman in front of him had just changed something inside him. Something he had spent years burying. A loud crack echoed from outside. Both of them froze. The walls trembled slightly. Annabelle's eyes met his. "This storm," she whispered, fear finally breaking through. "It's getting worse." Walter stared at her. At the determination still lingering beneath that fear. At the strength that had pulled him out of death. And for the first time in a very long time, he didn't feel like the most powerful person in the room. "Do you think Walter deserved to be saved? Even with his cold heart? Or would you have walked away like everyone else did to her father? Tell me below." The storm didn't slow down. If anything, it grew louder. More violent. Like it had something personal against the world. Inside the small room, the air had changed. It was no longer just about survival. Now there was tension. Thick. Unspoken. Walter sat against the wall, the cup of now cooling tea still in his hand. His breathing had steadied, but his mind hadn't. It kept replaying everything. The flood. The moment he couldn't breathe. And then her. Annabelle. A stranger who had no reason to risk her life for him. A stranger who didn't even seem impressed by who he was. That part bothered him the most. "You should rest," Annabelle said quietly, adjusting the cloth at the door again as water continued to seep through. "Your body needs it." Walter didn't respond immediately. Instead, he watched her. Studied her. "You said your father died in a flood," he said after a moment. Annabelle paused. Slowly turned. "Yes." "And no one helped him?" A beat. "No one." Walter nodded slightly, as if confirming something in his own head. "That was their choice," he said, his tone calm but distant. "People act based on risk. Survival. It doesn't make them bad, it makes them realistic." The moment the words left his mouth, he knew something had shifted. Annabelle straightened. "What?" Walter met her gaze, unfazed. "You said it yourself. It was dangerous. They chose not to die trying to save someone else." Her eyes hardened. "So that makes it okay?" "It makes it understandable." The room went quiet. But this silence wasn't soft. It was sharp. "You almost died tonight," Annabelle said slowly. "If I had stood there and watched, would that have been understandable too?" Walter's jaw tightened. "That's different." "How?" He opened his mouth. Then stopped. For the first time in a long time. He didn't have a clean, logical answer. Annabelle took a step closer. "You don't get to justify that kind of silence," she said, her voice trembling slightly, not from fear, but from something deeper. "Not when you've felt what it's like to be the one no one helps." Walter's expression hardened again. Defense. That familiar wall. "I didn't ask you to save me." The words came out colder than he intended. Annabelle flinched. Just slightly. But he saw it. "And I didn't ask for anything in return," she replied, her voice quieter now. Another pause. Then she added, "But don't make it sound like saving someone is a mistake." Walter looked away. The room suddenly felt smaller. Tighter. Like the walls were pressing in. "I didn't say it was a mistake," he muttered. "It sounded like it. It sounded like reality." Annabelle let out a breath. Slow. Controlled. "No," she said. "It sounded like someone who's spent too long convincing himself that caring is a weakness." That hit something. Deep. Walter's eyes snapped back to hers. "You don't know anything about me." "I don't need to," she replied. "I can see it." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "You see a man who built everything he has from nothing," he said, his voice rising slightly. "A man who doesn't rely on luck or emotions to survive." "I see a man who almost drowned," she said quietly. That stopped him. Completely. "And even now," she continued softer, "you're trying to pretend it didn't scare you." Walter's grip tightened around the cup. His knuckles turned white. I wasn't scared. Annabelle didn't argue. Didn't push. She just looked at him. And somehow, that was worse. Because in her silence, he felt exposed. Seen. In a way he hadn't allowed anyone to see him in years. The wind howled outside, rattling the weak structure of the house. Water began to seep in faster now, forming small streams across the floor. Annabelle turned away, grabbing a few items and placing them on a higher shelf. We might have to leave if it gets worse, she said, her voice returning to practical calm. Walter shifted slightly, wincing as pain shot through his leg again. You're not going anywhere in that condition, she added, glancing at him. I'll manage. No, you won't. I've handled worse. Annabelle gave him a look. You almost died 20 minutes ago. Walter exhaled sharply. I said I'll manage. There it was again. That stubborn pride. That refusal to appear weak. Annabelle shook her head slightly, turning back to her bag. You're impossible. And you're reckless. They locked eyes. Tension. Unresolved. Unyielding. But beneath it, something else. Something neither of them wanted to admit. Minutes passed in uneasy silence. The storm filled the gaps between their thoughts. Then, Walter's phone buzzed weakly beside him. He frowned, picking it up. Still working. Barely. Dozens of missed calls. Messages flooding in. His company. His world. Still spinning. Still demanding. Annabelle noticed. Important? She asked. Walter stared at the screen for a moment before locking it. Not right now. That surprised her. He noticed. Don't get used to it, he added quickly. A faint smile almost touched her lips. But she hid it. Another loud crack echoed outside. This time closer. The walls trembled again. Water surged harder under the door. Annabelle rushed over, pressing more cloth against it. But it was useless now. The water was winning. We don't have much time, she said, more to herself than to him. Walter watched her. The urgency. The determination. She wasn't panicking. She was preparing. And something about that made him trust her. Despite everything. Despite himself. You should have left me, Walter said suddenly. Annabelle froze. What? At the car, he continued, his voice quieter now. It would have been easier. Safer. She turned slowly. No. You risked your life for someone you don't know, he said. That's not smart. Maybe not. Then why do it? Annabelle held his gaze. Because this time, the answer wasn't about her father. Not entirely. Because for a moment, she said softly, you weren't a stranger. Walter frowned. What does that even mean? She took a step closer. It means, you were just a person who needed help. The words landed differently this time. Not like an argument. Not like a challenge. But like truth. Simple. Unavoidable. Walter looked at her. Really looked this time. And for a brief, quiet second, the walls he had built so carefully over the years cracked. Just a little. Right now. Who do you agree with more, Walter or Annabelle? Be honest, are you ruled by logic or by heart? Drop your answer in the comments. Outside, the storm roared louder than ever. Inside, two hearts stood on opposite sides of something neither of them fully understood. And neither of them knew. They were about to be forced much closer than they were ready for. The storm didn't give warnings. It didn't negotiate. It took. And that night, it was done waiting. A loud crack split through the air, so violent it felt like the sky itself had torn open. Then, the back wall of the house shifted. Just slightly. But enough. Annabelle's eyes widened. No. Water burst through the cracks like it had been waiting for permission. Within seconds, the thin streams flooding the floor turned into a force neither of them could control. We have to leave. Now, she shouted. Walter tried to push himself up, but pain shot through his legs so sharply it stole his breath. Damn it, he groaned. Annabelle rushed to him instantly, slipping her arm around his shoulder. Can you stand? I don't need help. You do, she snapped, not giving him a choice this time. Another crash thundered outside, and the entire structure groaned in response. That was all the convincing Walter needed. He nodded. Barely. Fine. Together, they struggled to their feet. Walter leaned heavily on her, his weight almost knocking her off balance, but she held firm, stronger than she looked. "Where are we going?" he asked, trying to steady himself. "There's a shelter about 2 streets from here," she said quickly. "An old community center. It's on higher ground. And you think we can make it through this?" "We don't have a choice." That much was clear. The water was already at their ankles, rising fast. Annabelle grabbed her bag with one hand, keeping the other tightly around Walter. "Stay close," she said. "I'm not going anywhere," he muttered. She shot him a quick look. "Good." Then she opened the door. The storm hit them like a wall. Wind howled. Rain lashed against their faces so hard it stung. The street was no longer a street. It was a river. Cars half submerged. Debris floating past. Wood, metal, pieces of people's lives carried away without mercy. Walter froze for half a second. Even he hadn't expected this. "This is insane," he said under his breath. Annabelle tightened her grip on him. "Focus. One step at a time." They stepped into the water. It was colder than before. Stronger. It pushed against them like it wanted to knock them down and keep them there. Walter stumbled immediately. Annabelle held him up. "I've got you," she said. The words were simple, but something about them made him feel something unfamiliar. Not control, not power, but safety. And that unsettled him. They moved slowly, painfully, each step a fight. Walter's leg dragged slightly, sending sharp waves of pain through his body. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Not now. Not with the way Annabelle refused to let go of him. "Why are you still helping me?" he asked suddenly, his voice strained over the storm. She didn't look at him. "Because you still need it." "That's not an answer." "It is tonight." Walter let out a breath, shaking his head. "You don't even know who I am." "I told you," she replied, pushing forward. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to everyone else." "Then maybe everyone else is wrong." That stopped him. Not physically, but mentally. For a moment he forgot the storm, forgot the pain. All he could focus on was her. A strong current suddenly surged past them. Annabelle lost her footing. For a split second, she slipped. Walter reacted instantly. His arm shot out, grabbing her, pulling her back toward him. Now it was her leaning on him. Their roles reversed. "You okay?" he asked, breathless. Annabelle blinked, surprised. Then nodded. "I'm fine." But she didn't move away immediately. They stood there for a second. Close. Closer than before. The storm raging around them, but somehow quieter in that moment. "Guess we're even now," Walter said quietly. Annabelle gave a small, tired smile. "Not yet." They kept moving. Step by step. Struggle by struggle. Until finally, through the blur of rain and darkness, a building appeared ahead. Old. Worn. But standing. The community center. "We're almost there." Annabelle shouted. Walter nodded, pushing through the pain. They reached the entrance just as another wave of water rushed past behind them. Annabelle forced the door open. They stumbled inside. The difference was immediate. Still. Quiet. Dry. Or at least drier. A few people huddled in corners, wrapped in blankets. Dim lanterns cast soft shadows across the room. All eyes turned toward them as they entered. 2 strangers. Soaked. Exhausted. Holding on to each other like they had no other choice. Annabelle helped Walter sit down against the wall. "You made it," she said softly. Walter let out a long breath, his head falling back slightly. "For someone who doesn't like help," he muttered. "I seem to be relying on you a lot tonight." Annabelle sat beside him, equally drained. "Don't get used to it." There was a hint of something in her voice now. Something lighter. Almost teasing. Walter glanced at her. And for the first time since this all began, a faint, genuine smile touched his lips. A volunteer approached, handing them both dry cloths. "Are you two together?" the woman asked kindly. Annabelle hesitated. Walter didn't. "Yes." The word came out naturally, effortlessly. Even he seemed surprised by it. Annabelle looked at him. He didn't explain. Didn't take it back. For some reason. She didn't correct him. They sat there in silence for a while. the storm still raging outside. But inside, something had shifted. The tension hadn't disappeared. The differences between them still stood tall. But now, there was something else between them. Something fragile. Something forming. Something neither of them could walk away from anymore. Walter glanced at her again. "You're still shaking," he said quietly. "I'm fine." "You're not." She sighed. "Neither are you." A pause. Then, without thinking too much about it, Walter gently took her hand. It was cold. Trembling. He held it anyway. Firm. Steady. Annabelle looked down at their hands. Then up at him. Neither of them spoke. But in that silence, something real passed between them. Something neither logic nor survival could explain. "Do you think this connection is real? Or just because of the situation they're in? Would they still feel this way without the storm? Tell me what you think." Outside, the storm continued to destroy everything in its path. But inside that broken shelter, two completely different lives had been forced together. And for the first time, neither of them wanted to pull away. The storm softened, but it didn't leave. Not yet. Rain still tapped against the broken windows of the community shelter. Softer now, like a warning instead of an attack. The air inside carried a mix of damp clothes, quiet murmurs, and something heavier. Unspoken stories. Walter hadn't moved much. He sat against the wall, his injured legs stretched out carefully, his shoulder still brushing lightly against Annabelle's. At some point, their hands had separated, but the warmth of that contact lingered like a memory neither of them addressed. Annabelle, on the other hand, hadn't been still. Not really. She kept glancing toward the door. Toward the storm. Toward something beyond this moment. Walter noticed. "You're not relaxed," he said quietly. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she adjusted her bag, pulling it closer to her chest. "I don't like waiting," she said finally. "For what?" Annabelle hesitated. Then, for the moment things fall apart again. Walter studied her. "That wasn't just about the storm. Come with me." The voice interrupted them. A volunteer stood nearby, looking directly at Annabelle. "There's a section in the back for families and those who need extra support." Annabelle blinked. "I'm fine here." The woman smiled gently. "It's not about being fine. It's just quieter. Safer." Annabelle glanced at Walter, then back at the volunteer. "I'll stay." The woman nodded and walked away. Walter raised an eyebrow slightly. "You turned that down fast." Annabelle shrugged. "I don't like unfamiliar places." Walter almost smiled. "You're in one." She looked at him. "No, I'm not." And somehow, he understood what she meant. A child nearby began to cry. Soft at first. Then louder. A woman tried to calm him, rocking him gently, whispering reassurances that didn't quite reach him. Annabelle's gaze shifted instantly. Her expression changed. Softer. Warmer. She stood up without thinking. Walter watched as she walked over, kneeling beside the child. "It's okay," she said gently. "Hey, look at me." The boy sniffled, tears streaking his cheeks. "The storm sounds scary, right?" she continued softly. He nodded. Annabelle smiled faintly. "But you know what? Storms are loud because they're trying to leave. They make noise on their way out." The boy blinked. "They do." She nodded. "And when they're gone, everything gets quiet again." Slowly, the boy's crying eased. His breathing steadied. Walter watched the entire exchange. Something about it didn't fit into the version of the world he believed in. There was no gain for her. No advantage. Just kindness. Unfiltered. Uncalculated. And it unsettled him more than anything else. When Annabelle returned, she didn't say anything. She simply sat back down beside him. "You're good with people," Walter said after a moment. She shook her head. "I'm good with pain." That caught his attention. "What does that mean?" Annabelle looked down at her hands. "It means I recognize it. Even when people try to hide it." A pause. Then she added quietly, "Like you." Walter stiffened slightly. "I'm not in pain." Annabelle didn't argue. Didn't challenge. She just said, "Okay." And that somehow felt worse than if she had pushed. Minutes passed. Then, Walter's phone buzzed again. This time louder. Insistent. He looked at it. Dozens of messages. Missed calls. His assistant. Board members. News alerts. His world demanding his return. Annabelle noticed the shift in his expression. You should answer it, she said. Walter hesitated. Then unlocked the phone. A message popped up immediately. Sir, we've been trying to reach you. There's been a major incident. The media is already reporting. Your car was found. They think you're missing. Another message followed. Stock prices are dropping. We need a statement urgently. Walter exhaled slowly. Of course. Even now. Even here. His world didn't stop. It never did. You're important, Annabelle said quietly. It wasn't admiration. Just observation. Walter let out a dry breath. Important enough for people to panic when I disappear. And come looking for you. He looked at her. Not everyone gets that. Something flickered in her eyes. Something quick. Something painful. Yeah, she said softly. Not everyone does. Walter studied her more carefully now. The way she held her bag close. The way her eyes kept drifting, not just to the storm, but to the people around them. Like she was always expecting something. Or someone. You said your father died, he said carefully. What about your mother? Annabelle's fingers tightened around the fabric of her bag. She left. Left. A long time ago. Walter frowned slightly. Why? Annabelle didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her bag slowly and pulled something out. The small framed photo. The same one from earlier. She handed it to him. Walter took it carefully. A younger Annabelle. Her father beside her. Both smiling. Happy. This was before everything, she said quietly. What happened? Her gaze dropped. My father lost his job, she said. Then we lost the house. Then we lost everything else. Walter remained silent. Listening. For a while he tried to fix it, she continued. Took different jobs. Worked longer hours. But nothing was enough. Her voice softened. He started to change. Became quieter. Tired all the time. Walter's grip on the photo tightened slightly. And my mother? Annabelle paused. She didn't stay to watch it fall apart. Walter looked up. She left us, Annabelle said simply. Said she couldn't live like that anymore. The words were calm, but the pain behind them wasn't. So it was just you and him, Walter said. Annabelle nodded. And then the flood came. She swallowed. And after that, it was just me. Silence filled the space between them. Heavy. Real. Walter looked back at the photo. At the man beside her. Something about his eyes. There was warmth there. A kind of strength Walter didn't fully understand. You still carry this, he said. Annabelle gave a small nod. It reminds me of who he was before the world broke him. The words lingered. And without realizing it, Walter felt something shift inside him. Because for the first time, he wondered, who was he before the world shaped him into this? Can I tell you something? Walter said quietly. Annabelle looked at him. Suspicious. But curious. What? He hesitated. Just for a second. Then. I wasn't always like this. She didn't respond. Just waited. My mother, he began, his voice lower now. She raised me alone. Worked multiple jobs. Did everything she could to make sure I had more than she did. Annabelle listened closely. She used to say, don't let the world harden you, Walter. A faint, almost bitter smile touched his lips. I guess I didn't listen. What happened? Annabelle asked softly. Walter's gaze drifted somewhere distant. She got sick. The words came out flat. Controlled. We didn't have enough money at the time. Not for the treatment she needed. Annabelle's chest tightened. So you lost her? Walter nodded once. And that's when everything changed, he said. I made a promise that I would never be powerless again. His voice hardened slightly. Never be in a position where I couldn't fix something because I didn't have enough. Annabelle held his gaze. And did it work? Walter paused. For the first time. He didn't answer immediately. I built everything, he said finally. Everything I said I would. That's not what I asked. Silence. Longer this time. Then. No, he admitted quietly. Annabelle's expression softened. Because money doesn't fix everything, she said gently. Walter let out a slow breath. I know that. Do you? Their eyes locked. Not in conflict this time, but in something deeper. Understanding. Outside, the rain softened further. The storm was passing. But inside, the real storm had just begun. Because now, they knew each other. Not just as strangers. Not just as survivors. But as two people shaped by loss. By abandonment. By the quiet, aching need for something they had both been missing for a long time. After hearing both of their pasts, who do you feel for more right now? Walter or Annabelle? Or do you think they both need healing? Share your thoughts below. Walter looked at her again. This time differently. Not as a stranger. Not as someone beneath his world. But as someone who understood something no one else ever had. And Annabelle, for the first time, didn't feel alone in her story. But neither of them knew. The truth they had just shared would soon be the very thing that threatens to tear them apart. By the time the rain softened into a quiet drizzle, the world outside felt different. Not safe. Not whole. But calmer. Inside the shelter, the tension had eased just enough for people to breathe again. Some lay curled under blankets. Others whispered softly, sharing pieces of their stories like fragile offerings. And in a quiet corner, Walter and Annabelle sat side by side. No longer strangers. Not quite anything else either. Just two people who had seen too much in one night. Annabelle leaned her head back against the wall. Eyes closed for a moment. For the first time since the storm began, she allowed herself to rest. Walter noticed immediately. You should sleep, he said quietly. Her eyes opened slightly. I can't. Why not? She hesitated, then gave a small, tired smile. I'm used to being ready. Ready for what? For things to go wrong. Walter studied her. That he understood. More than he expected. A volunteer passed by again, handing out small portions of food, bread and something warm in a paper cup. Annabelle took one. Walter didn't. Take it, she said, nudging him slightly. I'm not hungry. You need it. I'll be fine. Annabelle sighed. You're exhausting. Walter almost smirked. I've been called worse. She tore the bread in half and placed a piece in his hand anyway. Eat. He looked at it. Then at her. Then without another word, he took a bite. Annabelle didn't say anything, but the faintest hint of satisfaction crossed her face. Can I ask you something? She said after a moment. Walter nodded slightly. When was the last time you did something, not for business? He frowned. What does that mean? It means, no deals, no money, no strategy, she explained. Just something real. Walter leaned his head back thinking. Seconds passed. Then. I don't remember. Annabelle looked at him. Not with judgment, but with quiet sadness. That's a long time. Walter exhaled slowly. Everything I do has a purpose. And what's the purpose of tonight? That question lingered. Hung in the space between them. Walter didn't answer immediately. Because for once, he didn't have a clear answer. A soft laugh suddenly echoed from across the room. The little boy from earlier had started playing with another child. Their voices light, carefree, completely disconnected from the destruction outside. Annabelle watched them. A gentle smile forming on her lips. They bounce back quickly, she said. Kids don't overthink, Walter replied. They don't carry things the same way. Annabelle nodded. Sometimes I wish I didn't either. Walter glanced at her. What would you do differently? She thought about it. Then. I'd trust more. He raised an eyebrow. You don't trust people? I trust carefully, she said. Because every time I didn't, I lost something. Walter's expression softened slightly. That sounds familiar. Annabelle turned to him. And you? He let out a quiet breath. I don't trust easily at all. Why? Because when I did, he paused. It cost me everything. Their eyes met. There was no need to explain further. They both understood what that meant. A quiet stillness settled between them again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was comfortable. Annabelle shifted slightly, pulling her bag closer again. Walter noticed. You keep holding on to that like it's going to disappear, he said. She looked down at it, then back at him. It's all I have. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Walter frowned slightly. That's not true. Annabelle gave a small, almost sad smile. It is. Walter looked around the shelter. At the people. At the broken pieces of lives scattered everywhere. Then back at her. You have more than you think. She tilted her head slightly. Like what? Walter hesitated. Then said. Strength. Annabelle blinked. Caught off guard. You went into a flood to save someone you didn't know, he continued. Most people wouldn't do that. That doesn't mean I'm strong. It does. She shook her head lightly. No, it just means I couldn't walk away. Walter leaned forward slightly. And that's exactly why you're strong. The words landed differently this time. Because they weren't defensive. Or distant. They were genuine. Annabelle looked at him for a long second. As if trying to figure out if he meant it. And when she realized he did, something inside her softened. Thank you, she said quietly. Walter nodded once. Not making a big deal out of it. But the moment stayed. The lights flickered briefly. A few people shifted nervously. But they held. For now. Tell me something. Walter said after a while. Annabelle looked at him. What? What would your life look like if things had gone differently? She let out a small breath. That's a big question. Answer it anyway. Annabelle thought about it. Really thought. Then. I think, she began slowly. I'd have a small place. Nothing big. Just enough. Walter listened. I'd have a stable job. Something that helps people, she continued. And maybe a family. The last word came softer. Careful. Like something fragile. Walter noticed. And now, he asked. Annabelle looked away slightly. Now I just take things one day at a time. Walter nodded. He understood that too. More than he wanted to admit. What about you? She asked. What does your perfect life look like? Walter didn't hesitate this time. I already have it. Annabelle raised an eyebrow. Do you? He paused. Then. No. She smiled faintly. Honest answer. Walter let out a quiet breath. I thought it would feel different. Different how? Complete, he said. Annabelle's expression softened again. Maybe, you built everything except the part that makes it feel that way. Walter looked at her. And what part is that? She held his gaze. Connection. The word hung in the air. Simple, but powerful. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Because they both felt it. That quiet, undeniable shift. That something between them was no longer just circumstance. Annabelle adjusted slightly, her shoulder brushing against his again. This time, neither of them moved away. You know, she said softly, for someone who doesn't like people, you're not that bad. Walter let out a small chuckle. I'll take that as a compliment. You should. A pause. Then. You're not what I expected either, he added. Annabelle glanced at him. And what did you expect? I don't know, he admitted. But not this. She smiled faintly. Not someone who argues with you. Not someone who challenges me. And you don't like that? Walter looked at her. Really looked. Then. I didn't think I would. Her smile softened. But. He didn't answer with words. He didn't need to. Outside, the storm had almost passed. The rain now a distant whisper. But inside. Something had begun. Something quiet. Fragile. Real. Walter shifted slightly, his hand brushing against hers again. This time. He didn't pull away. Neither did she. Their fingers rested there. Lightly touching. Like a question neither of them was ready to ask out loud. Do you think this is real love starting? Or just two broken people finding comfort in each other? Be honest. What do you feel? For the first time in a long time, Walter felt something unfamiliar. Not control. Not power. Not ambition. But peace. And Annabelle. For the first time since she lost everything. Didn't feel like she was carrying the world alone. But just as that fragile connection began to settle, fate prepared its next move. Because not all bonds are meant to grow easily. Some must break first. The storm was over, but the damage it left behind was just beginning to surface. Morning came slowly. A pale, uncertain light filtered through the cracked windows of the shelter, revealing the aftermath: mud-stained floors, exhausted faces, and the quiet weight of survival. Walter woke first. For a moment he didn't move, didn't think. He just felt the unfamiliar stillness, the absence of urgency, the rare quiet in his mind. Then, reality returned. Sharp, immediate. His phone. He reached for it instinctively. Still working. Barely. But enough. Dozens of new messages flooded the screen. Missed calls stacked on missed calls. And then, a news alert. Breaking: Billionaire CEO Walter Hayes found alive, rescued by unknown woman in flood disaster. Walter's expression tightened. Another message followed. Sir, media outlets are already spinning the story. They're asking who the woman is. We need to control this immediately. Control. That word again. Familiar. Comforting. Dangerous. Beside him, Annabelle stirred. She shifted slightly, her hand brushing against his before pulling back instinctively. For a second, she looked disoriented. Then, she remembered. The storm. The shelter. Him. Morning, she said softly, her voice still heavy with sleep. Walter looked at her. And for a brief moment, everything from last night returned. The connection. The honesty. The quiet understanding. Morning, he replied. But something in his tone had changed. Subtle. But there. Annabelle noticed. What is it? She asked, sitting up slightly. Walter hesitated. Then showed her the phone. She read the headline. Slowly. Carefully. And as she did, something shifted in her expression. Not surprise. Not excitement. Something else. Distance. Oh, she murmured. Walter watched her closely. You didn't tell me, she said quietly. Tell you what? That you're him. Walter frowned slightly. I told you my name. That's not the same, she replied, her voice calm, but colder now. You didn't tell me what that name means. Walter exhaled. I didn't think it mattered. Annabelle let out a small, almost disbelieving laugh. It matters to the entire world, Walter. A pause. Just not to you? People around them had started noticing. Whispers spread. Phones lifted. Eyes watching. Recognizing. The atmosphere shifted quickly. The quiet shelter was no longer just a place of recovery. It was becoming something else. Something public. Something exposed. Walter stood slowly, ignoring the pain in his leg. I need to make a call, he said. Annabelle nodded. Of course you do. The words were simple, but the tone wasn't. Walter stepped aside, answering one of the calls. Sir, his assistant's voice rushed through the line. Thank God you're okay. We've been trying to. I'm fine, Walter cut in. Handle the media. No statements yet. Sir, they're already digging. They want details about the woman who saved you. No names, Walter said sharply. Keep her out of it. Annabelle heard that. Every word. And for a moment, something softened. But it didn't last. When Walter ended the call, he turned back to her. They won't involve you, he said. I'll make sure of it. Annabelle looked at him. Long. Carefully. And after that? Walter frowned. What do you mean? After the story dies down, she continued. After your world goes back to normal, what happens then? Walter didn't answer immediately, because the truth was, he hadn't thought that far. Annabelle saw it. In the silence. In the hesitation. And it hurt more than she expected. You don't know, she said quietly. It's not that simple. It is that simple, she cut in, her voice trembling slightly now. Last night you weren't this person. I'm still the same person. No, she shook her head. Last night you were just Walter. The words hit harder than he expected. And now, he asked. Now you're someone who belongs to a world I don't exist in. Walter stepped closer. That's not true. It is, she insisted. Look around. He did. People watching. Whispering. Phones recording. The reality of his life closing in. You think this doesn't change things? She asked. It doesn't have to. Annabelle let out a shaky breath. That's easy for you to say. A man approached suddenly, well-dressed despite the circumstances. Mr. Hayes, he said urgently. Your security team is on their way. They've secured transport. We need to move you out immediately. Walter's expression hardened again. Back to control. Back to structure. I'll be there in a minute, he said. The man nodded and stepped back. Annabelle watched the exchange. And something inside her broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But quietly. Deeply. So that's it, she said. Walter turned to her. What do you mean? You're leaving. I have responsibilities. And I don't, she snapped suddenly. The emotion in her voice caught him off guard. You think I don't have a life to go back to? Things to figure out after everything that happened? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? She demanded. Silence. Because again, he didn't have the right words. Annabelle shook her head, stepping back. This was a moment, she said, her voice quieter now. That's all. Walter felt something tighten in his chest. It wasn't just a moment. Then what was it? He hesitated. And that hesitation said everything. Annabelle nodded slowly. Exactly. She picked up her bag. Walter stepped forward. Annabelle. No, she said, stopping him. Don't. Her eyes met his. And this time, there was no warmth. Just pain. You were right about one thing, she added softly. People act based on their world. Walter's chest tightened further. And this, she gestured between them, doesn't belong in yours. That's not true. Then prove it, she said. The challenge hung in the air. Heavy. Real. Walter opened his mouth. But no words came. Because for the first time, he wasn't sure how. Annabelle nodded again. As if she expected that. Then she turned. And walked away. Walter didn't move. Didn't call after her. Didn't stop her. Because something inside him was still fighting itself. Logic. Control. Fear. Versus something new. Something unfamiliar. Something that demanded more than he knew how to give. The door opened. His security team entered. Sir, we have to go. Walter stood there for one more second, watching her disappear into the distance. Then, he turned and walked in the opposite direction. And just like that, the fragile connection they had built shattered. Do you think Annabelle made the right choice walking away? Or should she have stayed and fought for him? What would you have done? Two people. Two worlds. Both hurting. Both silent. Both wondering if what they felt was ever real. Silence. That was the first thing Walter noticed when he got back. Not the comforting kind. Not the peaceful kind. But the kind that echoed. Loud. Empty. Unforgiving. His penthouse looked exactly the same. Floor-to-ceiling glass. Polished surfaces. Everything in its perfect place. Untouched by the chaos outside. Untouched by the storm. Untouched by her. Walter stood in the center of the room. His coat still damp, his body still aching. But none of that compared to the tight, unfamiliar pressure sitting in his chest. Something was wrong. And for once, he couldn't fix it with money. Sir, the press conference is in 1 hour. His assistant's voice came from behind him. Walter didn't turn. Cancel it. A pause. Cancel completely? Yes. But sir, the media. I said cancel it. His tone was sharp. Final. The kind that ended conversations. But this time, it didn't feel like control. It felt like avoidance. Minutes later, he was alone again. Completely. Walter walked toward the window, staring down at the city. The floodwaters were slowly receding. People were coming out. Assessing damage. Picking up pieces. Moving forward. And suddenly, a memory hit him. Annabelle's voice. Storms are loud because they're trying to leave. His jaw tightened. Why did that stay with him? Out of everything. Why that? He ran a hand through his hair, pacing now. Restless. Unsettled. Annabelle's face kept appearing in his mind. The way she looked at him in the shelter. The way her voice changed when she realized who he was. The moment she walked away. You're still shaking. I'm used to being ready. You were just a person who needed help. Walter stopped pacing. Those words. They weren't just memories. They were questions. Questions he had spent years avoiding. He walked toward his desk, pulling open a drawer. Inside. A small old photograph. His mother. Smiling. Tired but warm. He stared at it for a long time. You always said not to let the world harden me, he murmured. His voice was quieter than usual. Less certain. I think I lost that somewhere along the way. Silence answered him. But it wasn't empty. It was honest. For the first time in years, Walter allowed himself to sit with it. Not push it away. Not bury it. Just feel it. The fear from the flood. The helplessness. The truth he didn't want to admit. That if Annabelle hadn't been there, he wouldn't be alive. And yet, when it mattered most, when she needed something real from him, he said nothing. Walter exhaled sharply. Frustrated. At himself. At everything. Why didn't I say anything? He muttered. Because he knew the answer. Fear. Not of losing money. Not of losing power. But of losing control. Of stepping into something uncertain. Something real. Something that couldn't be calculated. Meanwhile, across the city, Annabelle sat alone on the steps of a half-damaged building. The shelter had become too crowded. Too loud. Too much. So she left. Just like she always did when things got overwhelming. Hebe sat beside her. Her hands rested loosely in her lap. But her mind wasn't still. She kept replaying everything. The storm. The rescue. The way he looked at her. The way he listened. The way he didn't answer. Then prove it. Annabelle let out a shaky breath. Why did I even say that? She whispered to herself. Because deep down, she already knew. She wasn't just asking him to prove something. She was asking him to choose. And people like Walter didn't choose people like her. She pulled out the photo of her and her father again. Staring at it. You would have told me not to expect anything, right? She murmured. The wind brushed lightly past her. Gentler now. Almost comforting. But it felt real, she added softly. That was the problem. It didn't feel like a moment. It felt like something more. And that made it harder to walk away from. Annabelle wiped her eyes quickly. Annoyed at herself. I'm not doing this, she muttered. Not again. Not another disappointment. Not another person who leaves. Back at the penthouse, Walter made a decision. Sudden. Sharp. Unavoidable. He grabbed his coat again. His assistant appeared almost instantly. Sir? Where are you going? Walter didn't slow down. Out. Sir, your schedule. Cancel it. All of it. All of it. She hesitated. Sir, this could affect. I know exactly what it could affect, he cut in. Then, for the first time, his voice changed. Softer. But stronger in a different way. And I don't care. He walked out. Not as a CEO. Not as a man chasing control. But as someone finally chasing something real. The streets were still messy. Damaged. But passable. Walter moved quickly. Ignoring the stares, the whispers, the recognition. For once, none of it mattered. He didn't know exactly where to look. But he knew one thing. He wasn't going back to that empty silence without trying. Across the city, Annabelle stood up, adjusting her bag. She took one last look at the street, then turned, ready to walk away. Again. Annabelle. Her name cut through the air. Familiar. Unexpected. She froze. Slowly, she turned. And there he was. Standing there. Breathing heavily. Not composed. Not controlled. Just real. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. You came back, she said quietly. Walter nodded. I had to. Why? The question was simple. But it carried everything. Walter stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough. Because you were right, he said. Annabelle's brows furrowed slightly. About what? About everything, he admitted. About me, about the way I think, the way I avoid things that matter. She watched him carefully, waiting. I've spent my whole life trying to control everything, he continued. Every outcome, every risk. A breath. But you, he paused. You weren't something I could control. Annabelle's heart tightened slightly, and that scared me. There it was. The truth. Raw. Unfiltered. So you walked away, she said softly. Walter shook his head. No. I froze. A pause. Because for the first time, I didn't know what to choose. Annabelle looked down briefly, then back at him. And now, Walter held her gaze. This time, without hesitation. Now I do. He took another step closer. I choose you. The words were simple, but they carried everything he had struggled to say before. Annabelle's breath caught slightly. Walter. I don't have this figured out, he admitted. I don't know what this becomes, or how it fits into my world. Another step. But I know one thing. He stopped just in front of her. If I walk away from this from you, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Silence. Heavy. Emotional. Real. Annabelle searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for anything that felt temporary. But she didn't find it. You're asking for something real, she said quietly. I know. And real things aren't easy. I know that too. And you can't control them. Walter exhaled softly. I'm starting to understand that. A long pause. Then, Annabelle took a small step closer. Not fully. Not completely. But enough. Then don't choose me because of what happened, she said. Don't choose me because of the storm. Walter shook his head. I'm choosing you because even after everything, you're the only thing that feels right. Her eyes softened. Just slightly. The walls she had built. Still there. But cracking. Right now. Do you think Annabelle should trust him again? Or is it too late? What would you do in her place? They stood there. On the edge of something. Not broken anymore. Not whole yet. But close. Very close. Because the next moment, the next choice, would decide everything. The city had begun to breathe again. Floodwaters receded, debris was cleared, and the streets slowly returned to something resembling normal. Yet for Walter and Annabelle, normal had been redefined. Nothing felt ordinary anymore. The world outside could repair itself. But inside them, the storm had left marks that money or time could never erase. They stood facing each other on a quiet street near the shelter. The morning sun breaking through thin clouds. The air was crisp, clean, and full of the faint scent of wet earth and new beginnings. Birds chirped softly in the distance, unaware of the drama that had unfolded. Walter shifted slightly, his legs still tender, his coat damp, but his posture was firm, anchored. He looked at Annabelle, really looked, with an intensity he hadn't allowed anyone to see before. I've spent my life trying to control everything, he began, his voice quiet but firm. But last night I realized. I can't control the moments that matter most. And I almost lost the one that mattered most. Annabelle's eyes softened, though she kept her guard up. You can't make someone trust you again, she said carefully. Not after you disappear into your world. I know, Walter admitted. And I don't expect you to. But I need you to know. I've chosen differently. Not because of the storm. Not because of what happened. But because of you. A small, hesitant smile appeared on her face. And if I choose differently? He blinked, surprised. Then I'll wait. Her smile widened slightly, real this time, breaking through the armor she always carried. She stepped closer, closing the gap between them. Their hands brushed. And when Walter took hers fully, the gesture was neither hesitant nor uncertain. It was intentional. A quiet promise made without words. I want to know you, Walter said softly. Not the Walter everyone else sees. Not the CEO. Just me. And I want to know you fully. Even the parts you hide. Especially the parts you hide. Annabelle studied his face, searching for any trace of manipulation, of control. There was none. Only sincerity. Only the kind of vulnerability that frightened her most, and drew her in entirely. And I want to know you, she replied quietly. Even though I know it won't be easy. Even though I know it might hurt. I want to try. Walter's chest lifted slightly. Relief, yes, but also something deeper, something like awe. She was stepping toward him on her own terms. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. They began walking together, slowly, carefully. The streets were empty now, and every step felt deliberate. The city was waking up, but they moved in a world of their own, separate yet parallel. Walter glanced at her. Do you ever feel like the world just expects you to be strong all the time? Annabelle smiled faintly. Every day. And I'm tired of it. Me too, he said. But maybe we don't have to be. Not with each other. Her eyes met his. You're saying we can be real? He nodded. Completely. Messy, scared, vulnerable together. The corners of her lips lifted. A genuine smile. I think I'd like that. As they approached the community center one last time, the building that had held their first shared refuge, Walter paused. He looked at Annabelle, hands still in hers. I want something permanent, he said quietly. Not just tonight. Not just tomorrow. Something real. Something lasting. Annabelle tilted her head slightly. And what if the world tries to take it away? Walter looked at her, eyes unflinching. Then we hold on tighter. Together. A breeze swept past, carrying with it the faint scent of wet earth and rain-soaked memories. It felt like a cleansing, like the storm had finally washed away the fear, the uncertainty, and the walls they had both carried for so long. They stopped in the middle of the street. Walter gently cupped her face, his thumbs brushing lightly across her cheeks. The vulnerability in his eyes mirrored her own. I can't promise the world will be easy, he whispered. But I can promise this. Whatever comes next, I won't let go. Annabelle's eyes glistened. And I won't either. The first kiss was soft. Tentative. Careful. But as their lips met again, slower this time, there was no fear. Only acceptance. Only trust. Only the beginnings of something neither had allowed themselves to feel in a long time. Hope. Hours later, they sat on the steps of a small cafe near the shelter, sipping coffee in silence. Not the kind of awkward silence born of uncertainty, but the kind that exists between people who understand each other completely. Walter broke the quiet. Do you remember the little boy? Annabelle nodded. The one I calmed? He reminded me. How simple connection can be. No stakes. No calculations. Just honesty. Annabelle smiled faintly. Sounds like someone else I know. Walter reached across the table, taking her hand again. I want to be that for you. Honest. Open. Present. No walls, no pretenses. Her fingers tightened around his. Then I think we can try. As the city healed, so did they. Storms would come again, both outside and within, but Walter and Annabelle had discovered something permanent in the chaos. A bond that didn't need perfect conditions, a love that grew not because it was easy, but because they chose it, every single day. And in that choice they found freedom, hope, and a future worth stepping into together. Do you believe in love at last? Or unexpected love? Comment below what you think about Walter and Annabelle's journey. Would you have made the same choice? Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. Your time, your support, and your presence here mean more than words can say. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or kept you watching, please make sure to subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss a new upload. Until next time, stay blessed, stay strong, and keep believing in love. See you in the next story.